Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get us started. So as Cassidy mentioned, thank you all for being here and for this great alumni panel. My name is Hannah Christensen. I'm a senior studying neuroscience and general music, and I will be moderating this conversation today. We have a great lineup of alumni speakers to share their insights with the group today. Once we hear from them for about 40 minutes or so, we'll take some questions from the audience. If you want to turn your mic on to ask a question, I just ask that you please submit your question via the public chat and then I can call on you. And if you'd like us to read the question out to your panelists, you can just send me a private message in the chat and I'll read it out for you. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started with some introductions from our panelists. I'm just gonna go in the order of the list that I was given. So can I ask Elena Dennis to please start if you're okay with that?
Yeah. Hi, everyone, and thank you, Hannah. My name is Elena Dennis. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a manager at Start Early, which is an early childhood focused nonprofit based in Chicago, but we do work nationally. And I'm a fundraiser, so I'm on the development team raising money for a specific aspect of our work called the Educare Learning Network. And I think we were asked to talk a little bit about how we broke into the industry. I did something initially different after college, which we'll talk about at some point in this conversation, I'm sure. But I've been working in development for a little over 6 years. Going back to high school, I was really interested in sort of mission-driven, nonprofit-based work just because of how I was raised. And I had some nonprofit internships in college, including through the Chicago Field Studies program, where I interned at the Chicago Bar Foundation. So I was job searching a year or so after college and in touch with the supervisor from that internship, and really just got lucky with a position opening up, which they did not publicly post. I interviewed in the morning, was offered the job in the afternoon. And so really credit kind of my CFS experience with how I got that job because they knew and liked me as an intern.
Awesome, thank you, Elena. Sheila Patel.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Sheila Patel. I am class of 99. I also identify as she, her, and my nonprofit, I founded it in 2020 unofficially, officially a 501c3 in 2021. So it's kind of a startup also. It's called Gotham Scholars, and it's an education, college access, and mentorship nonprofit for first generation and low income, predominantly first generation and low income high school students, highly motivated students that, as one of our key principal partners says, can't aim for what they don't see. So we help them see. And just to kind of follow suit, I think, Elena, that was really nice introduction. And I was in CFS too. So, and now we have a partnership with CFS. So we actually have interns that work at Gotham Scholars in different functions through CFS. So if any of you guys are interested in that, I'll be posting again for the fall. But I am second generation Indian American. My parents came here in the 60s. And as such, as you can imagine, there were no jobs really available for them for what they were worth and were able to do. And they had to take care of their kids. So our beginnings are in Chicago. My dad loaded trucks in Frito-Lay, and my mom made lampshades factory line that's kind of by the Addison L stop. And, you know, years later, we moved out, and I found myself at Northwestern, and it changed my life and that of my entire family. So I really credit my education to the opportunities that presented themselves to me afterwards, and also a lot of my personal relationships that I still have. But since Northwestern, my first foray into urban ed was at a club called Compass that one of my friends started, and I didn't even know I was into it. But I just did that on the side as a sort of side hustle for the majority of my career. I went into consulting, you know, standard first gen, like I had to pay off my loans, I had to do my stuff, you know, so I went into consulting. It was 1999. That's where everybody went. And And then I was in brand development, and I worked in the women's business for limited brands for Bath and Body Works for about 12 years, all while still working in schools, where I could. And then I started my own skincare business, which is like a really strange way to get there, but that gave back to urban schools. And during COVID, I saw the conflict, and I saw the sort of the work that these schools were doing to try and keep their students, moving forward. And I made the switch. And so then I paused my company and I started Gotham Scholars. So that's me.
Awesome. Thank you, Sheila. And last but not least, Wendell Willis, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So thanks for having us. Wendell Willis, he, him pronouns. So today I manage a initiative, a little complicated, but try to make it simple. I manage a project that's kind of the intersection between the Milwaukee Bucks and Froedtert Hospital. So essentially, one of our architects, the president of Froedtert Hospital, I can work for him and the president of the Bucks directly, and a few other investors that are some of the ownership group, and then some other local philanthropists want to make investments into communities, but all centered and tied to the 12-year life expectancy gap between whites and blacks in suburban Milwaukee to the city of Milwaukee. So part of this work is modeled off of West Side United in Chicago, and some others on the country do similar things. But if you're in the Chicago area, essentially, like, you're in Evanston, if you're white, you're going to probably live 20 years longer than your black counterpart in the city of Chicago. So one zip code over makes a big difference in what happens. So had no plans of going into nonprofit, leaving Northwestern. Went into employee benefits and insurance because I had an internship there. Was very disillusioned, didn't want to go from insurance boy to insurance man. And so took some very intentional but non-linear steps to get into nonprofit. Went to a community center for a little bit, then to a CDFI, so a community development financial institution, which is just a term for a nonprofit lender. So from there, kind of cut my chops, really managing 55 sites in 22 states for lending activity for families in need, getting them automobiles. So that automobile was the spearhead to getting people out of poverty. Left there, went to work for Milwaukee Public Schools as chief operating officer, and then slid over to the foundation side. And then they recruited me into this. So there we go.
Awesome. Thank you, Wendell. Okay, so the first question to kind of kick us off here is, what were some of the impactful classes or experiences that y'all had in school, and particularly at Northwestern, that led you to consider and pursue your chosen industry or field? So if it's okay with y'all, we're going to go in the same order of introduction, starting with Elena.
Sure. So I think a couple things come to mind for me here. Definitely top would be the Chicago Field Studies program, which I hope students are familiar with. But if you're not, you basically take an internship sort of alongside class focused in a specific area. So I did the civic engagement focused class. And so everyone sort of in my group was doing internships in the nonprofit space or working on campaigns. I graduated in 2016, so it was primary season during that internship time. And I think it was really just a great opportunity to experience another nonprofit setting. I'd had a couple of internship experiences at that point, but every organization is different. And so just having the opportunity to kind of broaden what I was able to see and consider kind of the direction that I wanted to go was really important to me. And then in terms of classes, I think there are a lot of classes that I like really fondly look back on, but I don't know that like one specific class pushed me in this direction. I was a political science major and minored in sociology and history. And I think just any of the classes that I took that were related to social issues and learning more about like different types of inequity and how systemic racism like operates, like all of that really pushed me just, further along in my path and wanting to pursue the nonprofit space. So I think that really sort of, motivated me to be where I am now.
Thank you. Sheila.
Yeah, so I have a few, I'd say. I to this day tell even our students about 20th century American Lit with Professor Alfred Appel, who's I'm sure no longer there. I think he taught me how to think in a way that is interdisciplinary. I didn't have that experience at my school growing up. So to have Brancusi and like all of the musicians of the time and reading Nick Adams and like all of it, like Hemingway, all of it coming together was just this like, I don't know, aha, like it just was, I don't know, I just loved learning then. So that was really something that I think I use still. I have 2 kids and I really love holistic thinking about the world from a lot of different perspectives. So that's one. CFS for sure. I had an internship at Deloitte. It landed me my first job. I was in consulting for 7 years. It built a foundation for me to do all the work I'm doing now and all the structured thinking skills, the problem solving skills. Like, you know, people take windy paths. I'm so grateful for having been in, you know, having taken the path through consulting and, you know, corporate leadership to land in nonprofit, because I feel like I bring a lot of different perspectives than maybe people that have been in nonprofits from the get-go. So it just makes it richer, I think. And then I don't know, the only other experience, it's not a class, is like I said, Compass. You know, bringing students that I worked with, I brought them to Northwestern. And I remember one of the kids said, you know, where are the Black people? And they were my students. And I said, I can't answer this question for you, you know, and I felt really helpless. And I feel like now, like there's Arch Scholars and there's so many things that I think Northwestern is doing in the right direction. And now I have an opportunity to help students that I used to teach when I was 19, you know, volunteering with Greek mythology. See, so I think that was a really meaningful experience, though it really didn't dawn on me until my 40s, you know.
Thank you, Sheila.
Yeah, so much like Sheila, I would say a lot of the classes that I took that had to do with critical thinking, you know, being able to actually like solve problems and try to address like what is it we're actually looking to address were the most impactful. Obviously, so like I said, 11 years have passed from my graduation until I went to the nonprofit sector. So I wasn't planning that when I was taking classes. I think subconsciously, certain things happen when I look back. So I look at the econ part of my major. Um, a lot of those courses where I had friends that were more corporate finance and things like that, I was definitely not interested in that. So I gravitated towards the economic history of America or the economic history of Africa and India and other places to really understand like what's the root cause, like how is this economy built, how are economies built for all or not for all, and what does that mean. So understanding that subconsciously, I guess I was taking those maybe to understand now is I'm building and I'm working in community. That's really the work I'm addressing is like, how can you create a neighborhood or a community that does work for all, and understanding those levers that are important. And so the art side of it was helpful to me because so I don't know how it's set up now, but I know at the time to be an art major, you had to do basically, and I was doing printmaking, so you still had to take all the painting classes even though you're a printmaker. So and at that time, there wasn't use of technology. So if you're doing like a piece of lithography, it's in the old stone. So you really had to think through both like what the image was going to be when you pulled the print and working backwards. So typically when I problem solve, I think the art part of my brain was like, how are you working backwards to solve the issue? So typically, I think of the work I've been doing the last 15, 20 years has been primarily around, you know, what is it you're trying to address as a root cause? And I work backwards from there. I don't tackle it at the beginning. I try to tackle, you know, what is the best thing you're trying to actually address or do for whom you serve. So I think from that perspective, you know, I never start with knowing the picture well, I start with knowing the picture you'd like to get to. But again, the canvas is blank or like that piece of paper is blank, but using others to collaborate to build that because again, it's not right. I've worked like today, I work in 3 neighborhoods that I'm not living in those neighborhoods, but I'm serving those 3 communities. So I can give them a picture of what they should expect for themselves or want for themselves or they deserve, but they should be telling me because they may not want any of the things I have in my neighborhood. I can just say, though, you should expect, though, a high quality school. You should expect clean water. You should expect X, Y, or Z in your neighborhoods. So I typically design with like, what is the perfect picture for you? And let's work backwards from there to get you there.
Can I say one more thing? Is that okay?
Of course, yeah.
I know what you're saying. Like, I do think, I mean, for some of you that aren't graduating this year, I think that the mix, like I started out a math major because whatever that was, I thought was what I should do. So I did. I started out a math major and I tried every tech major because I thought I need to get a job in that space. But I will say that the balance, like moving to Soc and then just like liberal arts was incredible. So like I will never dog it, but it was like the mix, I do think, is what makes such great builds problem solving skills, allows you to understand so many different industries, so many different types of case studies that will inevitably come, your way. So I think like not being afraid to venture out and like, try, especially once you're a little further along and things are a little set for you, but, to try different things, I think it really does develop your ability to problem solve. And I'm so grateful that I had these like the left-right set of classes. I think it was great.
Thank y'all so much. Yeah, I really like this conversation between like you said, Sheila, like the left and the right side part of your brain, the science and the art side. We actually do have a question about that later on. Next question, can you tell us about your first job and whether it was exactly what you were looking for, or whether there were any surprises or bumps along the way?
Yeah, so a lot of bumps along the way. I think what happened for my first job is why I've been invited to speak on this panel a couple of times now. But I graduated a quarter early, and so I was finishing up in March. And that same day that I submitted my last final paper, I was accepted into Teach for America. And for those who aren't familiar with TFA, it's a 2-year commitment to teach in a low-income community, typically for folks who didn't pursue education, and sort of you learn the skills quickly to go teach. And so I decided to accept. It's a very prestigious program. I really wanted to make a very direct impact on a cause that was important to me. And I'd interned at TFA previously as well, so sort of thought I knew what I was getting myself into. I went through the sort of summers teaching program where you sort of learn how to do the work in a very condensed time period. I was hired to teach 7th grade math at a charter school on the northwest side of Milwaukee, and started teaching, and it was terrible. And so many things were going wrong in so many different ways that I won't fully go into here, but I made the really tough decision to quit, which was really hard because at this point I'm, a few months out of graduating college. Quitting my first job feels like a really big deal, feels like just a huge failure. Professionally, personally, really hard to tell the kids, obviously, that I was leaving as well. Felt like I was letting them down, but there were just a lot of different reasons that it wasn't a good fit for me, and I wasn't doing what needed to be done for the kids. And so made that decision. So I was unemployed by October, and it felt like kind of the end of the world at the time, but, I focused on kind of getting that next job. I really sort of stumbled into something. I think I'll credit the power of networking here. I had a conversation with someone that was meant to be an advice conversation, and instead there was a sort of job opportunity there to pursue. And so I was able to work at a ed tech startup, doing some contract work for the next 8 months, which sort of got me through my lease in Milwaukee. And then I decided to move back down to Chicago and got the job at the Chicago Bar Foundation that I referenced. So, yeah, a lot of things went wrong there. I think it was a really good opportunity. I think it was a great learning experience. I will say, for any of you who you know, your first job doesn't end up being what you want it to be, and you potentially decide to leave earlier than you would have expected. I think there's always something that you like gain from that experience. Even though I don't really sort of identify as a former teacher, the fact that I was in the classroom really informs a lot of what I do now in the education nonprofit space, like just understanding some of the language and challenges was really informed by that like brief stint. But yeah, so it's okay if your first job doesn't work out is the tip that I have to offer today.
Thank you. I think lots of us are going to need to hear that at some point. Yeah, thank you. Sheila.
Okay, I'm just gonna put something in the chat, so you guys, because I saw a couple of pings come up on my phone. So I still get the website pings, even though we've got people. So, so my first job out of Northwestern was at Ernst & Young as a consulting firm, and I was hired as a senior into their high growth middle market group. I was very excited about that because I was not going to be in the tech forward group, and because I didn't know how to code or anything like that. And remember, it was 1999, right? So I got hired into the high growth middle market group. I was super excited. And the day I started, right, I graduated in 99. I started in September. Y2K happened. They moved all the young people into any tech job that was available. It didn't matter if you had that background or not. So I found myself in Cincinnati, Ohio, at an energy company where they were trying to update all of their systems. And I don't know, I honestly, there's a part of me that probably couldn't explain the full thing even now, but it was a really, it was eye-opening. I found myself there. And if it weren't for, I still know his name, Charles Green, the manager of the project, I took him aside and I said, I don't know what anybody's saying. Everyone is saying words NT and Unix. I mean, I'm really dating myself, you guys, but like, it's like saying you don't know what, I don't know, Java or like, you know, I don't Python, like all that stuff, you know, it's like saying you don't know what an iPhone is to these people. Okay. Like honestly. And so I just was totally lost. And I just took copious notes. So I had pages and pages of notes. And I say this because my manager said to me, he said, guess what? You're not going to know. It's okay. But you are the youngest person in the room. You're going to remember the most. Take all the notes, answer the questions. You're a very good student. So when someone doesn't remember something, you're going to contribute in a meeting by saying, go and flip through your pages and say, oh, I know the answer to that because you said it last week. And he said, and that's how you'll begin. And it's how I started. And I worked my way out into a customer strategy group, which I loved, because now I was like working in financial services, but I was trying to grow loyalty among customers. And I was trying to do, you know, work in a space that felt more natural to me in business problem solving than figuring out the IT solution, which I learned a lot about, to be honest. Now it's all obsolete, but at the time, but I worked my way out. And, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, it taught me how to think, how to be quick on my feet. I spent 7 years there, even though 5 years there. And then I left with a partner and went to another consulting firm for 2 years. But so I did that work for a long time because, I mean, it was really fun to go to different industries and learn their business and then figure out how to grow their customer base. I thought that was really great. So my lesson there is that, like, even if you're handed not exactly what you expect it to be, there's something to learn, a lot. And I believe that the people that you surround yourself with, you know, if you are really humble and you want to learn, they'll feel it and they'll help you. I mean, that's my experience. And that like really set me up for a pretty long stint in consulting before I moved to my next job.
Thank you, Sheila.
So I would echo a lot of what Sheila and Elena both said. Your first job, on some levels, first off, it's not going well. That's fine. Don't worry about it. I think the main thing, kind of what Sheila said, like, you know, you need to show up and be accountable, work hard, do all the things to show that you're like, you know, you're there to be a great employee. But this is probably, and especially in today's age, if you stayed there for your entire career, that would be super rare. But you also don't want to be there for like just a cup of coffee either, right? So in my case, it actually was like a cup of coffee because I had interned at what was then the Time Insurance in Milwaukee, um, graduated, and then took a job with their sister company in the same building, or it was kind of sister, kind of parent. It was a weird relationship. I reported to part of the company that was the part of the parent company, but also like a sister organization in the same building, but with ties to the Netherlands, so called Fortis. And our focus was Time Insurance's first foray into managed healthcare. So they built their name off individual health plans. So if you're an LLC or a sole proprietor, they were doing insurance for those kind of mom and pop shops all across the country. They decided, I don't know, on a whim, to go into managed healthcare and doing like employer-based products. So I got hired into that group after graduation because I had the internship. They were like, "Oh, he can just come work for this group, startup. It'll be, and like the startup part of it and entrepreneurial end of it was great, but I'd say it was definitely not what I expected it to be. I mean, I knew what I was getting into. I knew I didn't really love health insurance. I don't think my colleagues knew how much I didn't like it, but I did my work, I did my job, and a lot of it at the time was configuring our system to process claims appropriately. So I wasn't like a real coder, but I was like the preamble to the coder. Like once code was built, I went into the system and actually set the switches to do what it's supposed to do. So it was an interesting learning, right? Leaving college at 21 and learning the various aspects of a startup organization, whether it be like embedding myself with the sales teams for conversations, upper management, like listening, and then also being called in to like report on where is your system, like where is the coding, can you process claims because we're about to sell this product. And if we sell a product, that means somebody's actually going to like submit a claim and like running it through the system as a test case. And you can imagine many test cases did not work. And then have to go to management and say like, here's why it doesn't work. And you've invested all this money in the system that still doesn't work. So like practicing giving bad news upline became kind of like a strategy for me, but like also I became very good at it, which I didn't know would lead to my next job. So again, I was only there for a cup of coffee because 6 months later, they decided to fold up and said the initiative was not going well. It was time to close down the shop and you will all get a severance package and move along your way. So 6 months after graduating, I was on to the next thing. I will say though, when you show up to your first job, it's a good thing to probably show up early and stay late because you never know who you're going to bump into. In my case, for a long time, the startup just had like a weird egalitarian set of senior managers, but no CEO. So like, I graduated in June, stayed until really December, January. And around, I would say November, they decided to hire a CEO. The guy, I was late one night, just staying working on my project. And he happened to be walking around and said, "Hey, you're here late. Why don't you just come get a drink with me?" So I walked across the street to the bar. And he's like, "You know what I'm here for, right?" And I go, "I have no idea what you're here for, sir." And he's like, "I'm going to figure out if this thing is going to work or not." And I was like, "Will you figure it out?" He's like, "Well, you'll be one of the first people to know because I'll just call everybody into a room." And so I kid you not, it was about 2 weeks later, he called everybody, all 70 people into one room and said, "We're shutting it down. Some of you get a severance package now. Some of you get a severance package like 5 weeks from now. Just depends on the timing of who we got to like get out of here. But this is how it's going to be." So I walked across the street, went to a different insurance company. They all happen to be located in the same spot in Milwaukee for the most part. And so I got a job there. So as a mentor of mine said, I was doing things by default, not by design. And so after a few different stints at companies like that, I had taken on a set of mentors that kind of say like, let's look at something different. And I'd more from that side of being in the coding, kind of quasi coding world, or at least configuration side, into kind of customer relations and solving problems for the employer base. So, your Harley Davidsons of the world, your Northwestern Mutuals, your, Briggs and Strattons would call me and say, "My employees aren't getting their claims paid, or this is happening, and we're really upset." And so again, got used to like relaying not so great information back to people, like here's what happened, here's why it happened, or going out and delivering renewals, their insurance renewal, which would be like 20, 30, 50% increases, and like explain to them why in front of a firing squad. And so I got pretty good at that, but again, disillusioned with having to do that over and over. And then happened to be on a sales call at one point and saw a plaque with somebody I knew, but from a different company. And when I asked him, I said, "You made a career change." He's like, "I think you're going down a line of questioning that's, really like different than what I think you're going down. So like, let's have a cup of coffee and talk about it." And we did. It was like, "Okay, you need to make a decision. Stay insurance boy to insurance man, or are you going to make a change? And like, what does that look like in one of those buckets?" So, and kind of having that conversation, we looked at like what I was passionate around, etc. And he's like, "You're really good at like selling stuff, but like rather than selling stuff, why don't you sell hopes and dreams for families? You probably need to be in the nonprofit sector." So who'd have known? And even so, when I made my transition, people said I was on the business side, so they put me in the business role, certainly usually operations or in like business management for a nonprofit. But what they really came to learn was that I was probably out better, like getting people excited. So not being a development person per se, but like if you take me to like get people excited about what we're doing with kids and families, I'd probably sell who's ever in front of me as an audience. So that became kind of my path. So it's been kind of a hybrid set of roles in nonprofit for me, but mostly around getting people excited to be involved in what we're doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Wendell. That's really interesting. I like these themes of gaining different experiences and skills across different job sets that have all helped you to get you where you are today. I just want to remind everyone that you can put questions in the chat and we'll be answering those questions in about 10 minutes. So feel free to send me questions whenever you'd like. Our next question for the panelists is, how does your art and science background play out in your work today? I know we've touched on this a little bit. I'm just gonna open it up. Anyone can go first. We don't have to go in order.
I'll go. I think we were talking, I talked about originally like this balance, right? I started a math major, I ended a social and business institution. So I feel like arts and sciences was like perfect for me. When I left consulting and I went to limited brands, kind of like what Wendell said, people just assumed I'm the business person. They put me in the operations group. And right from the moment that I interviewed, I had 6 interviews to get in, and in those 6, I said, I want to be in brand development. I really think that I've got a creative side to myself. And I think that arts and sciences, it's like sociology helped me understand organizations, people, cultures, how people work, how to stay open to ideas and collaborate. I think even as really linear is in brand development, right? Your customers at the center, and in my case, we ran the women's signature collection business. So I was at the mercy of what the customers thought of the next fragrance that was coming out. And, understanding their perspective was so important to the success of my business. And I learned those critical skills in a major. I didn't think that Soch would give me that, but there's so many stats classes, right? And there's and as a math major, I had that too. So that, I think the fact, I go back to this balance of playing around in the business and econ world, along with, the liberal arts classes. I think it made me an excellent brand developer. I'm really proud of the work I did there. And then it also continues as you own, or if you ever wanted to own or run, be the executive director of a nonprofit. I look to someone that can basically balance sort of the human side of this world and the business side of this world, right? To be able to always play those 2 cards. And I think arts and sciences is the perfect background for that. So that's my answer.
Yeah, I can jump in. I definitely agree, although I didn't have as math or science-y of a course load at Northwestern. I really stayed away from numbers as wherever possible. But I think a lot about the writing skills that I developed at Northwestern. I just was in classes, right, that required so many papers. And I think even though, it taught me how to craft an argument, which I think is super relevant to writing grant applications as I do now, but generally this sort of like research academic paper writing is just not at all the type of writing that I'm doing now. If I'm drafting like an appeal letter for a donor or any of these more just the different audiences, I guess, that are a focus of being a fundraiser. But I think it just helped me really improve my language skills and thinking about how to use words to get your point across, even if the voice of what I do now is really different. So all of those papers didn't feel very fun at the time, but definitely helped me become the really strong writer that I am now.
Yeah, and I would definitely say both skill sets, or actually all three that you guys have brought up, the writing piece, the analytical, kind of the creative part, obviously being art, like I said before, I spent a lot of time, in my nonprofit career, kind of being miscast as like, you should be the ops person. So you should be the COO, you should be the director of ops, you should be VP of ops, whatever it was, right? And I was just had a conversation a couple hours ago. I was meeting with a school, a new kind of charter school in Milwaukee, around some of the work they're doing, right? And she said, well, when you were COO, like how'd you spend most of your day? And I said, most of my day was actually quite frankly spent with the academics, because that superintendent believed that I could push her vision even further forward, because I was a bit of a dreamer. So that was probably the art side of me in pushing that piece, but also I could build in practicality because the analytics and having the econ classes, and then also framing it from the social econ part of it, building and collaborating, where people, quite frankly, like in a district, typically aren't designed to collaborate because they're in silos in certain departments, especially at like central offices. But again, like Elena said, the writing skills that I've got to kind of put my chops towards, and a lot of it is now, my investor group is a lot of billionaires, not a lot, but I mean, mostly. And, the emails I get back are usually 3 sentences or less. So you have to convey a lot of information very succinctly, very easily. So while I'm in the process of doing a business, like a strategy plan for them to see something, and they don't need it to be verbose. They just need it to be as succinct as possible. So like, what is it we're trying to do? How are we going to do it? What's the anticipated impact? And make it real clean and easy so they can extrapolate it back to them who they're working with as well. So I think all those things come into play, but being able to kind of code shift depending upon what the organization needed was been my greatest strength, which I attribute back to some ways some of those classes were built for me. And I'd say, that when you are in arts and sciences, and I'm obviously biased to being in that school, but I even listened to, my wife is an academic advisor at UWM Milwaukee, and she says like usually it's a lot easier working with students in arts and sciences because they seem to understand like the breadth of courses you can take. Don't think of it as lining you up for one thing. It's setting you up for multiple pathways, multiple options over time, so you can be malleable, because the hardest thing as humans is change. And I'd say like, for the most part, like as much as you can embrace it, I've come close to being able to embrace that. So when, you're going to get lemons thrown your way, can you make it into lemonade? And like, shift when you have to, when you need to. Because again, I've had some roles where I thought, one of the companies I worked for was like probably the greatest thing I ever did. And, I'd say like all things being equal, everything remained the same, I'd have finished out my career and retired there, type of thing, right? But not knowing that like that wasn't meant to be, and being able to flip that into something else. And so I couldn't imagine being where I am now, but you need to go through those things to get there.
That's very well said. Thank you. Okay, now I'm gonna open it up to questions. I haven't gotten anything in the chat yet. But feel free to unmute and ask any questions if you'll have any. Don't be scared. You can also use the chat feature. Yeah, Tyler, go ahead.
Hi, so this is mostly for Sheila. I'm looking at doing CFS and I'm a sociology major. So I was kind of curious if you could speak to what, who you worked with in CFS and how that kind of impacted the decisions you made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. And Elena was in it too. So we probably have two different
Yes.
perspectives in it. So I don't remember the exact person that was working. I have the name I can look up right now of the department head now. I'll look it up and put it in the chat. Okay. Because I think the person I worked with last year left. So I literally just set up a meeting with the new person. So my experience, I was really, motivated to work in a highly lucrative industry because I had to pay off my loans. So that was like, and I was good at business problem solving. I don't know why. So I just was like, okay, if I get a consulting job, honestly, I didn't realize what CFS would be until I was in it. At the time, I thought it was a path to a job. That's the way I looked at it. And it was in the end, but it was like so much more, right? Because I think that it's not every university offers this opportunity to go and like boots to the ground, do the job. And honestly, my experience was very tough. My partner was not nice. I mean, like he was just like, you're not listening. Like he'll just like he flatly would just like tell me feedback, and it was hard to take. So I'm not saying it was like a cakewalk at all. It was tough. And you have to write papers when other people are going out. You're like finishing your workday, and then at the end of the week, you're writing papers and like all of that. So it's like a different schedule than your peers, which sometimes was kind of annoying for me. But like in the end, there were people that I interned at the time that I did CFS. I was with other interns from other schools. So like to this day, I was walking in Times Square and this woman went by. She was with her kids. I was with mine, taking my kids to a show. And she was Sheila. And I swear to you, she was interning at Deloitte at the time that I was. I could not believe it. So like you meet other students, right? At least I did in my experience. They were all consulting interns for the summer. Some people got offers, and Tyler, I didn't. And I was mortified. Like I just couldn't believe it. But I put it on my resume, right? And so I had Deloitte on my resume, no matter whether I got a job or not. And like 6 months later, before winter break, I had my final job. So like my first job rather. So I think in the end, it's like a really great experience. And then as now a employer to interns that are interested in nonprofit, what I'd say is, I think just be really open to different industries. Like I went to consulting because I thought consulting intern, consulting job, like I'm just going to take this linear path. And like my intern is applying to med school right now. She graduated from Northwestern. She like started in the spring. She's applying to med school, but she's super passionate about nonprofit. She's super passionate about equity and education. And so she used CFS as a vehicle for doing that kind of work in her year of applying. And I was like, you're so much smarter than me, like that's so good. And now like she's doing all this stuff and I'm like, okay, who else can I bring in, So because it's just, you learn that, like, I mean, you guys are all really intelligent humans. And I think what you get the benefit of is, I hope, with all of the CFS partners, to learn from an employer hands-on. And I think that's like really priceless.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add there. I do think CFS has changed over the years. I know, I think there was more support in applying to internships when I was there than there is now. I do mock interviews through CFS, so I've kept a little bit in touch, and I know the staffing has changed. But like Sheila said, I would just be really open to whatever opportunity is out there. I think part of why I chose the internship that I chose was because they clearly they were like used to having interns. They sort of had, they would only have one at a time traditionally, but they kind of had a roadmap for it. Whereas a couple of the other small nonprofits that I interviewed with were more like, yeah, we'd be happy to have you. But I wasn't really sure what I was going to be doing there, and I was worried that I was going to be bored. So I think that's just a piece of feedback I would offer if you're like evaluating opportunities, is to make sure that you can see kind of at least something that you're going to get out of it, and you're probably going to get some things you didn't know out of it. But I would just be cautious of the more informal programs. Ask good questions so you know what you're getting into.
Do it, because I would say I'm an informal program, and like I could imagine it could become like a grunt work situation depending on like who the employer is. And I think like Zoe, who's my intern right now, I mean, when we did the interviewing, she asked really, she's like, what will I be doing? And I appreciated it. And I gave her, you know, a very structured response to what her objectives were for the next 4 months and how she was going to check in and what she was going to do. And I think that Elena's right. You should absolutely, a good employer will appreciate the line of questioning and will appreciate that you're, as long as it's like polite and you're kind of like, okay, so what will the role be and what will I do and all of that. But I think they'll really appreciate that, especially at a small one, because there's so much to do.
Awesome. Thanks for the question, Tyler. I noticed there's another one in the chat. Cedar, if you want me to read it, just give me a thumbs up, or you can read it yourself. Okay, there's been a lot of discussion around networking and nonprofits. What are your tips for current students starting to build their network and getting ready to apply to jobs? This is open to any of the panelists.
Sure. So I'd say, right now, since you're still on campus, whether you're, volunteering for a nonprofit or know people that are working in nonprofits, ask them, can you go to events that they're having, whether it be somebody's gala or function, networking opportunities that they have. How can you start attending that now so your name is out there, so you're known a little bit, what you're passionate about. Once you're in the workplace, again, same thing, right? So it's easy to typically sidle into galas and whatnot because people usually have a lot of tables that are being purchased but not filled. So, latching onto somebody's attendee, but also, there's the informal part of, doing informational interviews and just understanding, okay, like they seem like they have a cool job. Can you take somebody out for coffee and learn about like what they're doing? So when you have those conversations, I think especially when you're at an event, make sure you actually follow up with people because that's a big thing. People don't typically follow up. So I can say like, I was with somebody 2 weeks ago. They said they needed something from me and they haven't followed up and it's been 2 weeks. So like, I'm not doing that work because like, quite frankly, I don't need other meetings on my calendar. I've got enough to do for my current day job and whatnot, but it's up to you to do the follow-up. So like half of that work is just following up and being present. But there's a number of opportunities. So I would definitely say, get out there and put your best foot forward and start and say to people, yeah, I'm just very curious about what you do and how you got there, or I'm curious about like a path I'm thinking about myself and would love to run it by you just to get your insights. But, be authentic about it. But also, your whole thing is to really listen and get as much insight from them as you can. So just show the appreciation, but do the work.
So thanks for that question. Christopher, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. So I guess my question in general is more about what all of you have talked about in terms of building skills. For example, like writing and how the writing you're doing right now is not really the same as the type of writing you did when you were at Northwestern. And I was wondering, I mean, it could be writing, it could be math, it could be anything, but in terms of, I'm just a little worried, like I would love to be able to strengthen skills like that outside of the like just traditional academic taking classes. Like I want to be a better writer, and I know going to school and taking classes improves your writing, but I kind of want to accelerate that or increase the amount of improvement I have, and I feel like I'm lacking for ideas.
Since I'm the one who spoke about writing, I feel like I should address it. I didn't do anything especially specific. I was doing a lot of writing in high school because I was on my high school newspaper, and I actually started in Medill and switched. I do think if there are any opportunities to do anything through an extracurricular where you're writing, obviously there are a lot of those opportunities at Northwestern, or finding a way to volunteer where you could be leveraging some of those writing skills. I don't have a specific example, but definitely some of the things that I learned pre getting into development, I just did through volunteering, like volunteering at Feeding America in Milwaukee helped sort of set me up for interviewing for a development job without having the experience. So I don't think I was very helpful there, but volunteering, maybe.
A couple things also, I don't know if Northwestern offers this. I just have students that are really interested in Sarah Lawrence at the moment. So like, I know they have a writing institute. So there are other programs, there's summer programs that if you wanted to do, but my question would be what type of writing, because that's going to be more creative, right? So if you're looking for more like business writing, I think what Elena's poking at is a really good idea. And I think you could find either people through the alumni network or, like I did weird things. Like I would at that time cover letters and all kinds of stuff. Like you did a lot of writing, but like, I think like, going to even like the Career Center and finding internships in specific industries that will require business writing. Consulting is one of them. I would say those things could help strengthen your skills in a specific area. Like if you can create a great argument, probably better than you think because of the classes that you're taking. But if you want to, go into business or something like that, then I would 100% think about CFS or an internship or volunteering in some way to just get hands-on experience in it, or reaching out to alumni and say, hey, do you have some stuff I can help you with? Ask Wendell if you need some help. And I think you got nothing to lose, right? And they have everything to gain. They get a smart student for free, and you get like all this great mentorship and like editing, redlining on all your writing. So I really like what Elena said. I think it takes guts to do it. And I look highly on people that do that. I would imagine any of us would. I don't know, I'm speaking for you guys, but
So thanks for that question. I think we have time for one more question if anyone would like to ask. No. Okay, I have a question of my own. Do y'all have any advice for us? Like, if you could go back to your undergrad days, is there anything you would change? Anything you would tell us now that you wish you would have known?
I can offer one thought here, especially for those of you who are seniors, though this will be relevant for everyone eventually. I would just not compare yourself to what your friends and classmates are doing this fall. I think the fall specifically as a senior was a challenging time for folks like Sheila who were doing the consulting recruiting, and I just felt like I should be doing more to like be applying to jobs or whatever. And while TFA was a program that like I was applying to at the time, any other job that I would have been looking at, like the position wasn't open yet, right? Like you have to wait before you can apply to those. And so I think it's just best to sort of focus on your own thing and not be too worried about what your classmates are doing if they're pursuing different types of industries that have earlier recruitment cycles.
Tyler, did you want to ask something real quick? Go ahead.
Yeah, this is a little bit, as I was kind of looking for summer work last winter. I came across what seemed like a smaller field in basically nonprofit consulting, which seemed curious to me because the image that I always have is like of consulting is like the very high budget kind of field, which didn't seem to mesh with what I imagined nonprofit work to be. So I was curious, and obviously we're running out of time, but if you guys had any experience working with or in that like nonprofit consulting ideas.
I can answer that super quickly.
I'm happy to follow up in an
yeah,
email later.
It depends. Some organizations are better resourced and can use those sorts of things. So there are really big companies that hire more junior, like CSS Fundraising is a big like nonprofit consulting focused on development in Chicago. But often folks like later in their career go into nonprofit consulting. So my mom's a nonprofit consultant, so it can also be something that you like build to when you have more skills down the line.